There are various ways of applying water to the soil in irrigation. Furrow irrigation is the most widely used for horticultural crops in Australia, although various types of spray irrigation have been developed. As would be expected, each system has its advantages and its disadvantages, which will not be discussed here. Flood irrigation of various types is mainly used for cereal and pasture crops. This film will be concerned solely with furrow irrigation, and in particular with the importance of obtaining correct flow in the furrows so as to obtain full economic use of the water and even distribution in the root zone of the plants. On this, in the long run, depends the continued productivity of any irrigation settlement. Faulty irrigation can damage trees by waterlogging or by salting. Faulty irrigation has caused losses totaling millions of pounds in Australian irrigation settlements. This can be prevented by properly controlled irrigation in which water is applied to the root zone only. By far the most important factor in applying water to the soil is the flow rate per furrow, and fortunately this is under the control of the farmer. The flow can be regulated by nothing more complicated than the adjustment of the sluice gate. So simple, and yet so important. The correct flow for any furrow is that flow which gives a reasonably even distribution of water over the whole area to the depth of the root zone shortly after the flow reaches the foot of the furrow. Here is shown an actual section dug across a correctly irrigated bay. Notice the even depth of penetration of water as shown by the darkening of the soil. To make certain that he gets this even distribution of water both across and along the furrow, the wise farmer uses the soil auger constantly during irrigation as a probe to determine the depth of penetration. When the irrigator finds he's getting even penetration to the depth of the root zone, that is 2 feet deep in the case of orchard trees, right along the run, without scouring or much overflow into the drains, then he can be sure that the flow is correct. His test must not be restricted to one set of furrows in the block. The secret of success is full and proper use of the soil auger. Here is a simple diagram to show what happens along the length of the furrows in the case of good irrigation. Although this diagram shows only a few trees, the same principle applies to longer rows. When the correct flow is put down the furrow, the result will be an even distribution of water extending 2 feet below the surface along the entire run and without much overflow. This is the aim, to wet the root zone alone. Let us now see what happens when too small a flow is used. At the top of the bay, there is a heavy application of water, resulting in sloppy conditions underfoot. What is most serious, however, is the deep penetration of water well below the root zone. Lower down the bay, on the other hand, there is a light application with little penetration. Again, a diagram will show clearly what happens below the surface by the time the small flow eventually reaches the end of the run. At the top of the run, the water penetrates well below the root zone, where it can build up the water table and cause salting. At the end of the run, the plants are starved for water. This is a most serious condition. The trees are either drowned or starved. The soil is impoverished and water is wasted. A large flow, larger than the correct flow, although it does give uniform distribution, can apply too little water because by the time the flow has reached the end of the furrow, there has not been sufficient time for adequate penetration. It can have other serious disadvantages. It can, for one thing, lead to wastage of water into the drains. A large flow can also cause scouring of the furrows where the fall is greater than 3 or 4 inches per chain. It has now been shown that the flow is all-important and must be adjusted to give this even distribution. There are several factors which should be considered in selecting the correct flow. Length of furrow is important. The longer the required in even distribution. Long furrows may be inevitable because of the layout of the farm, location of supply ditches, etc. Long furrows mean long distances to walk. Branch ditches, or pipelines, where they can be installed, are effective means of reducing the furrows to suitable lengths. In general, furrows 5 to 6 chains long are satisfactory. Slope of furrows is something over which, on existing plantings, the farmer has little control. It is determined by the original slope of the land and the manner in which it was planted. It may be possible to water existing plantings in a different direction and so alter the grade by changing to furrows watering at right angles to the original furrow or by changing to diagonal furrows. However, the growth habit of citrus trees can make it difficult to install diagonal furrows. Using normal furrows, slopes greater than 6 inches per chain will probably cause erosion even when the otherwise correct flow is used. To prevent erosion and still get the water spread evenly across the bay, many closely spaced furrows are used. The most favorable slope is 2 inches to 4 inches per chain. The smaller the slope, the greater the care must be taken in land preparation. The third factor determining the flow necessary to give the penetration desired is soil type. Heavy clay soils are not very permeable and therefore need small flows for long periods, up to 24 hours. Sandy soils, on the other hand, being readily permeable to water, must be watered by using large flows for short periods, as short as 20 minutes in extreme cases. Then there is furrow design, another factor affecting rate of penetration and therefore flow. Furrow design determines what proportion of the surface area of the soil is wetted by the flow. As previously mentioned, closely spaced furrows are required on steep slopes. These permit the use of reasonable flows in obtaining even distribution and also prevent erosion by distributing the flow into many small streams. Large furrows, to carry big flows, are necessary on flat land. The flatter the land, the bigger the furrow capacity required. Broad-based furrows are especially suitable when side slope is not too great. The last, but not the least factor affecting flow to be considered is soil management. Weeds and cover crops improve soil structure, but also, however, obstruct furrows. Obviously, to meet this situation and to obtain even distribution, large flows are required. Where necessary, new furrows, made by disc ploughs, ensure flows reaching the end of the run in reasonable time. You might say, I can understand all that has been said of the various factors influencing flow, but as a practical man, I want to know exactly how I go about getting the right flows for the various soils, plantings, slopes, and so on my farm. Well, you will recall that good irrigation practice is to obtain a uniform distribution of water soaking the root zone of the whole planting. For all major soil types in the area, research and extension officers have obtained this even distribution by running trial irrigations down a few furrows using different flows in each furrow. They measure the time taken by each of the various flows to reach the end of the run and check the penetration with the soil auger. You can run similar trials yourself or can call in extension officers to help you. With these trials as a general guide, you, the farmer, can find out easily by yourself the time it takes to wet the root zone, and you can adjust your flows accordingly. Finally, remember that conditions are continually changing due to ploughing and cover crops, grading, and so on, and therefore, once having decided on the correct flow for a particular planting, bear in mind that this will not necessarily be always satisfactory. Make your auger your constant companion during irrigation. This is not just theory. Experience everywhere has shown it pays handsome dividends. If, for some reason, after a series of trials, you're still not getting the desired even distribution of water down to the root zone over the whole run, then something is wrong, and the extension services are readily available and are there to help you.